Volatile markets in the US and the projections for the USDA January report with the one and only Jerry Gidel, the expert on USDA projections, right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So we might bring up some projections here for the January report. Just see if you subscribe and like our channel, but afterwards we'll come up with these projections by Jerry Gidel. But Jerry, let's start up right on with the markets. We end up the last week with a very choppy market. What's behind of that?
Well, we've had uh, when you get into the Christmas holiday, there's lots of people that kind of step away from the market. Basically, sometimes it happens even after the December crop report this year. Maybe a little bit longer with some of the issues in South America and things like that. And then you've got two sets of people out there. You've got the commercials that putting on maybe their long positions. Speculators at this point, considering the general malaise that's going on, and lots of talk about the Chinese putting on tariffs and things like that. And even our administration talking about it also, that there's a lot of people put on short positions. And so what happens a lot of times in thin markets, we kind of run people in and out, and that's kind of what happened, excuse me, after the wow, all of a sudden I got a tough throat here. It turns up that the the shorts in the market got kind of bummed out in the thing here. Uh, with limited sales going on, we actually got above the 450 area, which has been a tough one on December corn and that. But then today it looks like, or here early in the last week of December, they decided to take profits and hit some stops and things like that. So both corn and soybeans kind of slip sideways sound. But that this kind of trading is not unusual this time of year. From there, there has been a little bit of international news. We've had some wheat buying from Algeria. We've had supposedly Egypt making some purchases too. But even in this atmosphere, that didn't do a lot for the wheat market. At the same time, a lot of people are just waiting to see uh, what the December crop report will put out. That's the final one for the U.S. here, and that's what we'll be talking about tonight.
Yeah, now for the wheat market, you mentioned off the air that there might be an increase in area in some parts of the U.S. that might be counterintuitive at this time, but sometimes that happens.
The interesting twist in the world of wheat is the fact that, and we did end up having reduced acres this year versus a year ago, but on that weather-wise, it's been kind of streaky. Eastern corn belts had too much rain, southeast too much rain. Parts of the western plains, though, and Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas have had less rain. But interestingly enough, uh, for wheat farmers, going ahead and planting more wheat, you just have your seeds out there. You don't have to worry about putting fertilizer out, things like that. You did all that later in the year. And if you get a good crop or the rains come, then you got more stuff to sell. So you're exactly right. A lot of times, low prices mean you plant less of that. In some cases on wheat, sometimes it's the opposite in the past history. The other twist of it is that the land they have out in the western plains area, western Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas is not very conducive for a lot of other products or other grains and crops to grow. So it's not like, oh, golly, I think I'm going to plant something else. There's not a lot of alternatives for some of these producers. So that's the other issue that pops up. But yeah, so wheat is sometimes has some crazy responses to price points.
Now, what's the major highlight for the upcoming USDA report in January?
Well, we've had a lot of this very strong corn projections here from the USDA all along. They started out, over 180 bushels, moved it all the way to 183.4, I think it was, or 183.8, and that they've brought it down slightly here and that. But I think uh, the thing about a USDA production report is that their measure that they get, even from some of their own test plots, is that they go ahead and get that kind of harvested on a timely basis. This year, particularly in the corn Midwest, particularly west of the Mississippi, the dry down of this corn crop was so fast and so dramatic, and that producers out there were harvesting, and it was a good sized crop, no doubt, and probably higher than last year's 177 and a half bushel crop. But going all the way to 183 plus is a huge jump. Talking about 6 bushels. I think the reality of it is that with the amount of grain that came in substantially below 50.5% moisture, which is number two corn, and that's what things are judged on. The interesting thing is the number of wagons going in there, or trucks or whatever into the elevators, and about 55% of the U.S. crop is on farm, and the rest of it's, goes to the elevator. So not all of it dryness went that way, but the reality of the whole thing is that when you deliver 15 or 16% moisture corn, and then you turn around and then instead deliver 10 or 11% corn, which there was a tremendous amount of that, that's going to pull down your average yield. That's just weight lost. And I think that's going to come back to haunt the USDA. Not huge. We've been slowly I think we took off 7/10 last month, or back in November, I should say. And now I think there might be another bushel and a half. But that's 100. I'm anticipating 175, 180 uh, million bushels being less in this USDA report. Well, last month here in December, because of our strong export demand, because of our strong ethanol demand, they went ahead and increased our demand by 150 million on corn, 50 million on ethanol. And I kind of feel like subtly that the feed demand number might be up another 50 or so too. But I don't sense that they're going to change those numbers. Is if we take down 175 off of the 1740, 1.75 billion bushels, we're going to have a number down below 1.16, and probably closer to 1.55, something like that. And it's going the right direction, but it's not going to be a number that automatically says we're going to be going sharply higher. But I do think that that's going to continue to make the producer out there being reluctant seller. Uh, if he was right that the crop size wasn't this huge number, that at one time here we had a number over 1.9, and now all of a sudden we have a potential carryover stock below, definitely below 1.6 and probably closer to 1.55 at this point. So that's the interesting thing about it. From there, excuse me.
Now, how do you see this report in a time that the US dollar would be stronger against the US real, how the market would react at this time?
Well, yeah, I totally agree that on the soybean side of things, and particularly the soybeans are a lot more of a world crop than corn is. Corn is important for feeding areas of the world. China's, us, some parts of Europe, things like that, where a lot of meat production is ongoing, and that. So, uh, on the soybean side of things, yes, the weakness that's gone on in the real here definitely makes Brazil a very competitive producer out there in the world. The interesting twist on it is that that's been part of the reason I think that the soybean market has been relatively. We've had a rally in the corn for on the December prices, which is it kind of went off the middle of this last month, but it was a 40 cent or plus market. The March values have probably been 50 cents off the lows because of the fact that there's domestic demand, there's export demand, so everybody's been slowly. That's where the bids have been at this point. Soybeans, different story. South America didn't have the best crop in the world. I still think that there's some issues about the size of that crop because they really haven't been a seller in a big way here since mid to late summer last year. And now the U.S., we had a 1.4 bushel decline back in November, and that tightened things up down below 52. And I kind of feel like that we'll probably see another couple cents, maybe 25 million less production here on the final one at this point, final output, I should say. And I think the other twist on and the soybean side is that we've had very, very strong exports and domestic crush continuing. Now, back in November, when they reduced the crop size by the USDA, they want to also reduce some of the demand scenarios that were out there and kind of left their carryover stock at lower than the previous month, but also uh, in reality, uh, they took away about 70 million worth of demand. I think that 70 million of demand is going to have to come out here on this next report and so I think there's a chance that we're going to see the U.S. soybean carryover stock also tighten up here. Not so much from the standpoint that the size of the crop is going to be reduced much. As I said, 2 to 3 tenths of a bushel type situation, and that. But at the same time, uh, the numbers are suggesting we're moving down below 400. I don't know that we're going to end up uh, you know, right now it could be even higher than a bigger decline than the 80 million I'm kind of throwing around in my tables here ahead of it. But at this point, uh, it's going the right direction. I think that's the interesting thing. Of course, then that means what's South America going to do? In general, the Brazilian crop looks in pretty good shape. It continues to get timely moisture, things like that. It had a very late planting date. I don't know what that's going to do on the other end out there. It does, to me, suggest that their harvesting dates will be as early. Sometimes we're starting to see some pretty sizable harvesting in Brazil here in the last weeks of December, early January. I don't think we're going to see that this year just because they didn't really get rolling on plantings until second week in October. Sometimes they did. It's the middle of September they got stuff going, and that. And then I think the other big issue is Argentina has not had the kind of growing season that Brazil's had. Well, it's not been terrible, but there has been the issue of the leafhopper that damaged their crops last year. Not so much in beans, but in the corn and that. And so I kind of feel like that this Argentina is a little bit more of an unknown at this point. And originally they weren't going to plant as much corn because of the leafhopper and that. But it looks like in some recent updates that they've decided that weather-wise, and what they've observing about the insects down there they're kind of switching back to a couple 100,000 hectares back into corn and less in beans because even in the world right now bean prices comparatively are not as strong as corn has been over the last 3 to 4 months.
And what else would you like to add before we finish with our last edition in this year?
Well, I think everybody uh, are still this markets are going to continue to be really focused on what the USDA says, but and that I kind of feel like that we're going to maybe tighten up a little bit of the U.S. supply, but we're still in the situation going on into 2025 where South America's output will be important, and then we're also going to be watching very closely the new Trump administration here in the U.S. and how uh, sometimes people make a lot of statements, and then when it gets down to reality, they're the bite isn't as bad as the wolf or whatever you want to say, the talk. And so we'll have to see. Definitely, there's still lots of unknowns out there. South American output. What's going to happen in the Black Sea? That's another one that's up in the air. We've got the uh, Gaza Strip. There's so many different things floating around in this thing, but I kind of feel like that we're going to continue to muddle along and then see what the weather does in South America, particularly Argentina, and then how the U.S. does it. 2025, I kind of feel like that there could be some better upside than you might think. But at the same time, I wouldn't be wanting to tell anybody that there's going to be a big panacea of $12 beans and $5 corn. I think both of those are we're going to have to take some while to get things changed at this point before we get to those levels. But at this point, I'd love to wish everybody a happy New Year, and we'll be back next week to talk about South America. South American crop sizes, what we see in those, and what kind of a wheat crop we might be planting in the U.S. But at this point, uh, we're probably still going to be looking at the U.S. statistics, but right now, uh, there's so many data that comes out in the January report, so we got a couple more things to highlight next week.
Right. Thank you and Happy New Year, Jerry.
You bet. That's all. Look forward to a prosperous 2025, huh?